Hello and welcome to this webinar, Transitioning from GRC, Creating Holistic Risk Management. I'm your host, Richard Mail, one of the founders and directors of Acuity, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Alexandra Limbian, who's now with McKinsey, but we worked together in her previous role.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Richard. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. I'll invite you, Alex, to introduce yourself properly a little later on. First, I'll just explain the plan for today. We do like to make these sessions as interactive as we can, so please do add any questions in the chat box as we go along. We will leave time at the end to answer your questions. We're also going to conduct a poll at some point during the session so that you can have your say. Please do feel free to contact us after the session as well. You can see our LinkedIn details on the screen now. And in the usual way, we will share the webinar recording in the coming days. And finally, when we close the session, a questionnaire will pop up. Please do take a couple of minutes to complete it, give us your feedback, and let us know the sorts of topics that you'd like us to cover in the future. So on our previous webinar series, it was entitled Getting Cyber Risk Ready and Why an Integrated Approach is Key. I know that many of you followed that series and are still listening, so that's great to see. The current webinar series is exploring the need that we see for governance, risk and compliance as a discipline and for GRC solutions to evolve in order to meet today's real assurance challenges. So this is the third webinar in a series of 4 that we're now running. And in the first 2 shown here on the screen, we already spoke about risks to be aware of during digital transformation in today's increasingly digital business environments and the limitations of traditional GRC approaches. In this webinar, we'll be discussing the importance of integrated risk management and how you can transition effectively from what you might call a point-in-time GRC solution to a fully integrated operational risk management solution, and one which is aligned with your digital risk management needs. It's worth noting that in addition to wanting to move on from an existing GRC solution, which may not be delivering what the business really needs, many of our customers were previously running with what you might describe as a homegrown solution, perhaps based on a cleverly integrated set of spreadsheets, an Access database or SharePoint. And these organizations were looking to migrate to something which has been purpose designed for the types of risks, controls, and other entities that they need to manage, and in a more operational way. In this series, we're looking at all of these issues. And then on the 16th of September, my colleagues will be running a demo of our Stream integrated risk management platform, where we'll try to draw together the themes of this webinar series. So I'd like to return now to our guest, Alexandra Limbian. And just briefly, Alex, we worked together to implement Stream for a number of use cases when you were a manager at GTT Telecoms. Perhaps you'd like to say a bit more about that program.
Sure. So I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Alexandra Limbian. For the past 8 years, I've held various roles in risk management groups, where I was mainly focusing on audit, compliance, and client security assurance. As Richard mentioned, I have recently joined McKinsey & Company based in Prague, where I work as a senior security analyst. But my history with Acuity goes back a couple of years when I held the position of senior security and audit manager at GTT. And that's when I met and worked with Richard together to implement their solution, the integrated risk management tool, into the GTT environment. So for those of you who do not know GTT, that's the telecom service provider, and they're servicing customers mainly in the US, in the UK, and in Europe. They do have a very impressive and complex compliance portfolio. And at that time, it was comprising of approximately 10 international standards. So in my position as a senior security and audit manager, I was coordinating the external audit program, and I was also coordinating GTT's response to client audits and customer due diligence. And having had previous experience with deploying an integrated risk management tool, I was then asked to lead on implementing Stream in our environment.
And then we met at the ISF in Las Vegas, didn't we, the Congress?
We did, yeah. I think the year was 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was visiting the conference with the lead auditor at GTT, and it was actually him who saw the Acuity booth. So we went over and we had a conversation with Richard, and this then turned into various meetings and demos and us going through our requirements list and our use cases. And yeah, so one implementation project later, here we are doing this webinar.
So, thanks, that's great intro. So let's have a look at the agenda then for today. The first item is just to briefly summarize the conclusions from last time as to what we feel are the key differences between traditional GRC solutions and today's need for integrated risk management. We'll also look at the various different use cases that we see with our customers, and all of these components should fall under an integrated risk management umbrella. And then the main event of the day, the third bullet here, is a discussion with you, Alexandra, on a number of questions which we've put together, which we hope the attendees will find thought-provoking. And then there's time at the end for your questions, so please don't hesitate to post any questions during the session, and we'll come back to them later on. So just to recap on these key points from the previous webinars, you can see on the left we have some of the key issues that we see with traditional GRC, and on the right what we feel is really needed to support businesses today. So the focus of any risk management must be aligned with business objectives and business strategy, all the way from how you identify critical business information and supporting infrastructure, to how you assess the potential business impact of risks, and then how you aggregate that data up through business-oriented reporting. So there are clearly many technical elements to it, but ultimately one of the key audiences for risk management is your senior stakeholders. And then we have a compliance versus a risk-based approach. And obviously if one of the strategic objectives that you have is to be compliant with a certain standard, for the sake of argument, ISO 27001, and this requires certain controls to be implemented and effective, then of course the compliance work may indeed be your priority. But what's really important though is that the business objective of any compliance program should be, it isn't always, but it should be to reduce risk. And your ISO auditors are going to want to see why controls have been selected in terms of the risks that they're mitigating. So ultimately, you do need to present an integrated view of your risks with your mitigating controls. Now, a lot of our customers do like to assess the status of controls across the business as a starting point, then identify their risks, and finally link the controls to the risks, and that's fine too. I mean, moving into an operational phase of risk management, what is important is that if ongoing audits, internal audits, detect that controls are not effective, then you can see which risks are elevated. On the next point, traditional GRC solutions are modular, which can easily encourage silos in the way that they're implemented, where you don't have that integration between risks and controls, risk management and incident management, risk-based scanning and patching, risk-based auditing, etc. As many of you know, one of my sort of words of the moment is operationalization. Not an easy word to say. So what does operationalization of risk management mean? Well, it means continuing to feed into your system your latest risk assessments, latest control assessments, incidents, audit findings, etc., so that you maintain a holistic, current risk management view, which is meaningful to stakeholders. And on the final point here, all of this needs to be scalable as you roll out your improved risk management across the business, using automation where it helps and where it adds value. So this slide shows some of the disciplines, the various disciplines that may be part of your integrated risk management approach. And these are all initiatives I suspect that you'll recognize and may well be covered already in your business, or which are priorities still needing attention. I do quite like this slide. I've used it often in early conversations with customers. Once you've identified which of these application areas are relevant and important to your business, some more than others, of course, then you can prioritize them and then think about the best logical sequence for bringing them in and integrating them effectively with everything else that you're doing. So as I said, I'll now turn to, or at least virtually turn to Alexandra. We have 5 questions which we put together, which we can now discuss. And the first question, if you're ready, the first question is this. So based on your experience with risk and compliance management, what new and emerging challenges do you see?
Right.
Yes.
Yes, so I think whether we like it or not at this point, it's very difficult to speak about any upcoming challenges or anything that lies ahead without taking into account the fact that we are in the midst of a global pandemic. And yes, this is actually changing the way that we go about pretty much everything in life and also in business. And it's a topic that everybody speaks about right now, but from this point of view, I believe that businesses will have an increased focus on business continuity and operational resilience, but also supplier management. And probably what that means for security managers like myself or security analysts is that we will see a lot of clients seeking increased assurance through probably questionnaires and audits and other type of due diligence processes. And I think there will also be an increased interest in demonstrating resilience, in demonstrating the ability that you'll be able to provide the service at the same quality in the face of uncertainty. And then another thing that I think is coming and maybe here to stay, don't know, is the remote audit, definitely, and all the other challenges that come with working from home.
Yeah. And I do, the word resilience, you see it more and more as what organizations are really trying to improve. And I do like that because, of course, we can't be 100% secure. It's not about preventing incidents. It's about improving. Incidents will happen, making improvements so the business is as resilient as possible to future incidents. So that's a theme we see. And I think assurance, for as long as I can remember, risk management has always been about assurance and providing assurance to senior management that you're doing what you need to a sufficient level, providing confidence to address the key risks. So all of these are themes that we also see. And of course, in the media, we're in this pandemic and all of these things are really in focus. But of course, there is a suggestion there might be more of these sorts of outbreaks in the future. So it's certainly going to focus people on improving their arrangements with these areas in mind. For sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Of course, a pandemic will go away, hopefully sooner rather than later. But as we move into the post-COVID world, all the controls that we put in place now to help us see the business through the pandemic will be as valuable after the pandemic as well.
Indeed. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that one. Let's move on to the next question here. So, how do you think organizations should be thinking about risk and compliance? This obviously is echoing some of those earlier points.
Absolutely. I think in order to be effective, risk needs to be managed at all stages when it comes to delivering a product or a service, or even when the market becomes unstable as it has lately, or when the interaction with customers also changes as it absolutely has lately. So this, of course, means that risk needs to be addressed at an enterprise level, but also at the stages of design, development, delivery, support, and end of life. And I believe in many cases, we have organizations which still perceive the risk management function or the wider security group as being the one solely responsible for identifying and managing risk. And I also believe that organizations' ability to manage risk and keep it within the organization's risk appetite is heavily impacted by how well and to which extent the risk management function is actually integrated with the rest of the business. Risk needs to be viewed as a necessary business process, and it's not just something that you turn on or off when you need it, or something that you forget about completely when things go well.
So I was just going to pick up there on so that everybody has a role to play and right through the organization. Actually, I was thinking about having to look at emerging threats, but also changing threat profiles. So at the moment, you can read in the press there's increased hacking activity. The bad guys taking advantage of perhaps more home working and exploiting the challenge that the companies have. So even more focus on awareness, in these times.
Absolutely.
Remaining vigilant against phishing and all the usual sort of things. It's even worse because of the pandemic. But they're not new threats, but the profile is changing.
Exactly. And I think in order to effectively, integrate and influence the company culture when it comes to risk management and all the controls that are put in place to manage the risk. I think that, you know, the risk group needs to have, I'd call it like a top-down and a bottom-up approach. So you do both. And, you know, we look for direction and senior management for budget and for resource allocation. So we seek that top-down support from them. But at the same time, I think we should look for support and cooperation from the wider business. And, you know, we should, as a security group or risk management group, try to influence and create this cultural change in the company culture. And the end goal should be changing the employee perception from, you know, when it comes to policy or following policy, it's always something in the lines of, I'm following this because my manager said I should. And we should change this to, you know, I'm following this policy and these rules because I understand how my actions can help manage risk, and I understand what can happen if I do not comply, right? So
yeah, that sounds a lot better.
I think, so I think the message here is basically, you know, that risk management, or like a risk management organization or a security organization is not successful if it works in a silo independently. You cannot effectively achieve security for the many by a group of a few unless there is a streamlined cooperation. And so here, one last point that I would like to make is around control ownership, which kind of plays into the same thing of not having a siloed approach. Of course, in order to manage risk, organizations put in place various controls, and these can be like admin controls, you have policies, procedures, or they can be technical controls. You know, you have a piece of technology in support of that process or procedure, whatever the case may be. But these controls need to be owned, and I think they need to be managed and measured for effectiveness throughout the business and also within the business. So again, going back to, I don't think a team of a few can achieve security or manage risk effectively for the many without a good cooperation and integration of you know, streamlined integration of working together.
And then of course you need to have good visibility of that control effectiveness, what you're measuring, what you're monitoring, which I think probably brings us quite nicely onto the next question, which is about technology and trying to use tooling to help with that. So this question, before we go on to the poll, how can technology help organizations manage their risk and compliance in the digital era? And I suppose, what was your experience when you migrated from a previous approach into a integrated risk management when you were at GTT? We have this.
Right. So yeah, we have this quote from Gartner, and it basically says that companies that select individual solution for each regulatory challenge they face will spend 10 times more on IT portion of compliance projects than, you know, companies who take a proactive and holistic approach. And I absolutely do agree with this, and it's the reason you know, we wanted to show this quote, and I thought it was very suitable for this conversation, but also very telling about all the disadvantages of not working in a streamlined and coordinated manner and working with a tool that acts as a single source of truth, right? Because let's face it, I mean, in a business, the main focus is to sell the products, to deliver value to the customers, and the priority will rarely be to deal with some overly complicated and complex internal process or you know, a complex compliant management program, right?
Absolutely.
So an integrated approach to risk management will not only support the business strategically, but I think it will also free up resources from these repetitive administrative tasks and you know, direct focus towards managing risk and supporting the business. And also, you know, at the end of the day, every activity that you do that is supported by a built-for-purpose tool or a software, it will be more streamlined and effective as opposed to traditional, you know, checklist-based way of working where you have spreadsheets and, you know,
indeed.
So that is, and especially it will especially help if the tool is configurable to fit, you know, the individual needs of an organization. And at the same time,
I was just going to say, yes, of course, a new solution brings its own challenges, and so you've got some of those.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think it's also important to mention here that I have already spoken how, and I've mentioned something about how risk management function works in a silo at times, and it's like a bit parallel to the rest of the business and not in complete alignment. And I think we see at times that the same is true within the risk organization itself. So a traditional setup for such a group would be you'd have your strategy, and then you'd have your technology, and you'd have your governance, and you'd have your people. And most often these are separate groups, and they work towards the same goals, but they can also take a siloed approach, and I think they most often do. So we need to see governance and compliance group work in parallel with cybersec group, the technical branch, the people who deal with vulnerability, with pen testing, with incident response, and so on and so forth. And I do think a very good way to end the siloed approach is to deploy a risk management tool something that can act as a central source of truth for all components of risk, and then where everybody communicates and everybody cooperates and everybody provides input in one place. And then you apply all these controls to a unified asset list. And I think
and link all of those different things together.
Exactly.
Indeed.
Exactly. Then you have this relationship, and then you have this overview that you do not really get by maintaining different Excel spreadsheets by different teams in different locations. It's just you will not get the same value out of that.
Right.
So in terms of making the shift from Excel based to a built for purpose tool, probably there's like a few things that people might want to consider if they're thinking about this change. For me, from my point of view, I think the biggest shift will be spending less time on tracking and more time on control assessment and evaluation and improvement. Because one of the key features of such a tool is that it can assess the control using a more complex formula, for example. So you would go beyond having a, is this control implemented, yes or no? So there will be a exactly. There will be a shift from this, and you'll be in a situation to assess a control that's validated in terms of existing documentation, ownership, effectiveness. So that's definitely going to be a change. And then on the compliance side, I think this will also definitely mean a faster way to assess controls and then produce reports and have dashboards that have compliance status. And then you also have the possibility to assess overlap controls, which is another thing that you don't really get to do with maintaining Excel spreadsheets.
So assess once and then report many where the control is common.
Exactly. And then on the risk management side, I'd say a great value of having an integrated risk management tool is that it allows for a risk-based evaluation of an asset, and that can produce a cost-effective and proportionate controls to the asset. So basically, it can help you to not overprotect and not underprotect an asset, and it just can help you to achieve a balance, I'd say.
Right. That's good. And of course, bringing in a new tool, as I say, brings its own challenges, and sometimes there's a nervousness. Oh, we're going to have to change how we work, and we like the way we assess controls, and certainly as a solution vendor, we're very focused on this, and so what we've done about it is built configurability very much into our platform, so we can generally configure the way that the customer wants to assess controls and risks into the platform, so that they don't have to change the way they work just to use it. And that's quite important. We'd still encourage them to use a more objective way of working, of course, if they're not, but we do want to try to align with an existing methodology where we can, and that's an important consideration for us. Okay, right, so I think now is the time for a poll. So this will now be displayed. So in terms of the key activities, identifying and assessing your risks and assessing your controls, those are typically the first areas that organizations would link together, i.e. you link your risks with your mitigating controls. After that, what this list is showing is, in our experience, the information cyber disciplines which are most commonly integrated with risk management. So the question for this poll is, which of these disciplines are you most interested in integrating with your risk management? So we've got incident management, so i.e. when an incident does occur, you could then link an incident to the related risk and also to the controls which perhaps were not as effective as you would have hoped. Vulnerability and asset management, so this is about prioritizing the patching which would typically follow vulnerability management and scanning, being able to prioritize that work based on risk. audit management, so the check part of Plan, Do, Check, Act, in terms of linking your ongoing program of audits to the risks and mitigations that are most important to your business, and then risk treatment and control improvement deliveries. This is about how you might prioritize and organize all of the various control improvements and other actions arising from risk management into a program that you agree with senior management and, of course, obtain the all-important funding for. So those are the options. At Acuity, we think that how to set about integrating these different disciplines will be a great topic for future webinars. So if you could tick the top 2, which are of most interest to you, it'll be really interesting to see the results of this poll. And then we'll plan a session on that. So I'm just giving you another couple of minutes to do that. And then we'll have a look at the result. Okay. Okay, so I think we've got the result there, and there's a lot of interest in risk treatment and control improvements, how we prioritize and organize. 59% for that. And the next most popular topic was integrating vulnerability and asset management with risk management. So I'm sure the others are also important, but we'll certainly take that into account on our webinar planning. Thank you very much. Okay, so now I'd like to return to the webinar. We've got another couple of questions here. Okay, so the next question: what advice, Alex, would you give to someone based on your experience looking to improve their risk and compliance? We have these points.
Yeah, okay, so one piece of advice I would give to anybody looking to improve their risk and compliance program is to adapt to international standards. So this means you might want to go for certification or you might not. It doesn't really matter, but I think a framework, you can still have a framework in compliance with, say, you mentioned before, Richard, 27001 or NIST or COVID, and you can be certified to it, or you can work with alignment to it. But I think it's definitely a good thing to have. And then another good way to assess your security or the maturity of your security program is to compare your program to others in the industry. So you could use benchmark tools, such as the CIS, or the ISF also has a benchmark tool. So what this will do is it will align your controls to industry best practice, and it will help you manage risk in a manner that is, recognized as effectively internationally. And I think it's very important to understand where you are in terms of the controls that you have in your environment and what you need to do in order to improve. And then,
we certainly. Sorry, I was going to say we certainly have customers that are not in a regulated industry, so there isn't a particular standard they have to follow. And we'd almost always suggest we'll consider 27001 because it does provide a very broad.
It does.
All the topics that you should be looking at, even if you don't assess yourself in detail, it gives you a very good baseline. But there we are. Yes, sorry, interrupted.
No, I just wanted to stop a bit on the whole certification versus no certification. You don't have to go for certification. It's not a must. It's a nice thing to have. To me, personally, a certification means various things. So for one, I think it helps you to align your controls so you can effectively respond to risk and build resilience. But then, as a second point, I'd say it's also sort of a common language that businesses speak to, when it comes to security. And when it comes to entering a business relationship with each other, automatically, if okay, they have ISO 27001, for example, okay, there's somebody responsible there for risk, and there's somebody responsible for security management, and they have policies and they have procedures, and they work around protecting systems and their data and their people, and there's data classification and so on, and the list goes on, right? Indeed. But you would basically know that these things are already in place. So that's my take on certification. It's not a must. It's a nice thing to have.
Yeah. Okay.
And then a second piece of advice would be to adopt an integrated risk management tool or a built for purpose a tool, and we have already discussed about the value that it brings. But I think also important to mention here is that when you deploy such a tool in your environment, like, take implementation like one step at a time, because risk management means so many things, and there's so many processes involved and so many teams and various sources of input, and it can easily become overwhelming. So my advice is to start small and then build up as you go, because you might want to look at implementing a standard first, if that's what you do or that's what your priority is, or maybe just look at your headquarters first, or your main operations site, or your main plant, or and build from there. And there's also various approaches you can take. You can have at the center your compliance, or you can have at the center your risk management program. There's various ways to go about it, but my advice will be start small and then expand scope over time.
Grow on it. Yeah, that was back to that point from earlier with all the different disciplines and
exactly.
prioritizing which ones you are key for your business, and then building the program around that. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got one final question, which is, how easy is it, I suppose, in your experience, to get investment for risk and compliance management tooling?
Right. Well, lately I think we've seen in recent years that security budgets have gone up, and they continue to do so because organizations have understood that managing risk is a strategic input to managing business, so it's something that you need to do. So for this reason, I believe getting budgeting for a purpose-designed tool for managing risk and compliance should be viewed as you're getting a tool that is supporting your business strategy.
Yeah.
But I think if you are in a position where you need to put together a business case for acquiring such a tool, my advice would be to focus on the value that it brings on decision makers in your company, and the board and the senior management, and focus on things such as that it can provide on-demand reporting and analysis, that it can provide personalized dashboards. You have a very fast and quick overview of compliance status, click away. It can help you with performing quick gap analysis, and then of course when it comes to risk management, there's the quantitative and qualitative risk management that you can do with
Indeed, and I'm glad you mentioned quantitative, because of course we run a whole webinar series on the value of using quantitative risk assessment, and not so much to obtain investment to buy the solution in the first place, but of course once you have a risk management approach, then you're going to be making investment applications to the board for improvements for security. Exactly. And being able to quantify the risk reduction that you would obtain from those investment in your controls is again part of what you need to do for senior management approval. So yeah, so quant is a key element of that, which we've covered a lot in the past. Okay,
absolutely right.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Alex. That's brilliant, and we really appreciate your time and contributions to this webinar. I'm sure everybody found your views very interesting. We'll have a look at questions that have come up in a moment. I'll just like to sort of draw the presentational side of this webinar to a close and just summarize these key points. So firstly, it's important to make sure that your risk management activities are business focused, to take into account all of the relevant risk related initiatives, i.e. including controls assurance with key standards, things you mentioned, Alex, plus management of your incidents, audits, vulnerabilities, policies, exceptions, third-party assurance, to name but a few, and to look for an integrated risk management solution which allows you to capture and present the key data in a business-oriented manner, which brings together related information rather than having separate modules that encourage siloed working, integrates the data together, which is agile and scalable as you extend your scope across the business. Okay, so that's what I think we've been discussing. Resources wise, you'll notice hopefully on the webinar portal that there is a handouts section, and what we've done is put some relevant resources there which you can download. The first is an integrated risk management checklist. This outlines what our clients measure, what they tell us they measure when they're evaluating different risk management solutions. So if you're currently looking for tooling, it'd be worth having a read of this. to see if there are some areas or key capabilities that you hadn't considered yet. They've also just published a new brochure that's shown here on the right-hand side called Bringing Clarity to Risk. And like this webinar, this is all about taking a holistic risk-based approach for digital transformation. If you'd like any additional information about Acuity or our risk management platform Stream, you're very welcome to request a bespoke demo, which we can organize, or to download our blog and white papers, view our previous webinars, and we will put the recording of this webinar out a link in the coming days, along with the presentation slides. I'd also encourage you to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn for the latest news. Just a quick reminder that on the 16th of September, we'll be concluding this executive webinar series, which will be based on a live demonstration of Stream to hopefully bring to life the various themes that we've raised. Okay, so now I'm just going to look down at some of the questions that you've been sending in. So we have a question here: how do you ensure risk is aligned with business strategy? Very good question, and I would hope that we have been trying to answer that very question, Alex. This idea that understanding the business objectives, do we need to be compliant with certain standards? Are we trying to address our biggest risks, which may be in our supply chain? So being really clear on what are the key risk management objectives of the business, and then saying what are the disciplines that are important to deliver that. So identifying our third parties, which ones are our key third parties, and raising assurance that they have the controls in place that they need. So really it's about that diagram I showed, I think, with all the different disciplines, and deciding which ones are key to your strategy, then prioritizing those. Would you want to add to that, Alex?
No, I think it's absolutely right. And again, it's a matter of cooperating with senior management and supporting them in whatever they want to do. Again, all of these things that you said, and then I don't know, does the company want to enter a new market? How are we going to manage that risk? So again, I think it's a lot in the cooperation, working alongside management, alongside people who are responsible for strategy and not in parallel to them.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Another question here related: how long does it take to implement an integrated risk management system? Well, if that isn't one of those how long is a piece of string questions, but I think the answer again is the same, isn't it? So focus on your business objectives, your priorities.
Absolutely.
What are the use cases that are of interest? What is the current status of those use cases? Have you done that gap analysis? Have you, et cetera, and then prioritize? Yeah. What would you like to add?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, basically the answer is, I think as long as you want to, or as long as you need to, in order to fulfill your objectives, basically. So again,
Yeah.
it's totally up to you to align the implementation to your strategy, in a way that supports your goals and your company's objectives. And I've said this before, you might want to take a risk-centric approach, or you might take a compliance-centric approach, and this very much depends on how you work. So either one works, but it's just really up to you and your priorities.
Yes. We had a question here: has COVID affected investment? I think you might have indicated, Alex, that it's probably encouraged organizations to look more carefully at what they should be investing in risk management, would you say?
Yeah, I think budgets that are allocated to risk management have increased in the last few years. But then again, you're looking at what's happening right now, and you're looking at a global pandemic where there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of businesses going out of business, a lot of unemployment that's happening. So yes, people are, more reluctant to spend right now. But I think also COVID and the whole pandemic has kind of taught us that we are a bit underprepared for, as a collective, for responding to such an unforeseeable event. Yeah. So there is definitely a need for more risk management, if anything. And even setting COVID aside and the pandemic, the usual threats are still around, with or without COVID. Hackers still want your data, and there's still system vulnerabilities still exist. employees still click on phishing emails, and the list goes on and on and on. So
I think there's
I don't think.
Yes, go on.
No, I just wanted to say that I don't think that the need for risk management will stop in the pandemic.
No, indeed. I was thinking about the question that obviously we're saying that traditional GRC solutions might not be what you need now. So let's say we've already invested in that, and then you're going back to the board to say, well, we think you should be investing in a different kind of integrated risk management solution. That's more difficult, I suppose, is it, going back again when we've already invested in something that perhaps isn't delivering anymore what we need? That's quite challenging, I imagine.
It must be, of course, but again, you see that everything's constantly changing and constantly evolving, and we have to respond accordingly.
Absolutely. Okay, yeah. Thank you. If more questions come, I'm noting the time. If more questions do come in, we will answer those after the webinar. We will respond to all the questions that come in. But thank you very much for those very good questions. Okay, so thank you for attending. Please do get in touch with us if you'd like any more information on Stream, or if you'd like to discuss with us your priorities for risk management and assurance. I'd like to thank Alex Limbian again for joining us today. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. And we look forward to bringing you the next webinar on the 16th of September. And in the meantime, please do reach out if you'd like to speak with us, and please complete the short survey as you leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you.